But you can't miss, actually you can't afford to miss. That is from 6:30 onwards up to 8 a.m. and you can talk to us via social media platforms at K24 TV, at Joel Church, as well as SMS and WhatsApp numbers, and I'll be sampling some of your feedback before wrapping up New Dawn this morning. The question is, what next for Kenya? Keep the conversation going. But this morning we begin with these stories before later on just highlighting what is on our dailies. That is on the People Daily, the Standard, and as well Daily Nation, and the Star. Also Taifa Leo will be in our newspaper review this morning. But let's begin with these stories where President William Ruto now wants alleged sponsors of the ongoing protests to come out and explain their alternatives instead of funding anarchy. President Ruto, who was at a service in Bomet, has vowed to crush the demos in a bid to protect the country's democracy, even as he faulted the Gen Zs for snubbing his dialogue calls. And as Martin Opio now reports, President Ruto did not spare the media over the coverage of the protests.
A Sunday service in Bomet County provided the president with an opportunity to sound a warning to alleged sponsors of the ongoing demos. President Ruto lamented that the said individuals and organizations cannot continue to hide behind the youths as faceless.
I want to challenge those who are sponsoring, orchestrating, funding this violence to step forward and give us their alternative views on how to take Kenya forward. They must not remain anonymous. They must not remain formless or faceless. They must step forward and tell us, beyond anarchy and destruction and violence and mayhem, what are their alternative plans for Kenya?
Last week, the Ford Foundation had faced a litany of accusations that it was financing at least 16 organizations to fund demos. Accusations both the civil society organizations and Ford Foundation denied.
Those who are sponsoring, those who are marketing, those who are orchestrating this violence, they cannot continue to be faceless. They cannot continue to be nameless. They cannot continue to be formless. They cannot continue to be anonymous. Let them step forward and tell us, what is this violence going to achieve in the Republic of Kenya? And what is their plan beyond this violence?
Ruto is not mincing his words to the youths who turned down his offer for dialogue.
Walisema tusipitisha finance bill. Mimi nimewacha finance bill. Nikawaita wakanasema hawataki kuja kuzungumza na mimi. Wakaniambia niende huko kwa X. Mimi nikaenda kwa X. Wakatoroka huko hawakukuweko.
The head of state, alongside former Premier and Azimio Chief Raila Odinga, had formulated a multi-sectoral dialogue team which was to kick off on Monday last week, but flopped. The youths vowed not to attend and instead demanded the president act with swiftness in bringing accountability in his government.
Wakaniambia tuitishe mazungumzo. Nimeitisha mazungumzo, wamekataa. Nimewaambia wanaendelea kusema wao ni faceless, wao ni formless, sijui wako nini. Mimi nimewaambia sasa, my friends, you know, I have given a chance to everybody to say whatever they want. You know, it cannot continue like this. The country is much more important than any group of people.
The president says come Tuesday, where fresh rounds of protests have been announced, things will not be business as usual.
To build a tabernacle.
The head of state is promising to crush the protests, which he says are being used to cause anarchy and denting the country's democracy.
We want a peaceful, stable nation, and our issues are resolved using democratic means. Ama mnasemaje watu wa Kenya? Mnasema tusimamishe hii fujo? Na tusimamishe hii vita? Na tusimamishe maandamano ya maafa? Na maandamano ya kuharibu mali ya watu? I want to promise you it's going to stop. Enough is enough.
Coming less than a week after the Communications Authority censured media over its coverage, the president is calling for responsible reporting.
I also want to request the media to report responsibly. reporting, celebrating, encouraging violence, destruction of property, anarchy, mayhem is irresponsible.
Ruto fell short of pinpointing instances during the coverages of protest where the media contravened the code of conduct, even as he claimed a section of media was keen to advance anarchy.
If the country goes the wrong direction, there will be nothing to report and there will be nowhere to report from. So we must all act responsibly.
Communications Authority Director General David Mugonyi, in a letter to CEOs of media houses last Wednesday, claimed some of the content surrounding the protests violates the Constitution. Martin Opio, K24 TV, Nairobi.
Meanwhile, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has now called on the Gen Z to stop their anti-government protests, expressing concerns over the potential, or rather over the potential for further property destruction and loss of lives due to infiltration by groups with malicious intent. Gachagua, speaking during a service at PCA Church in Kayole, stressed that the protesters' grievances have actually been acknowledged, as Ben Kirira reports.
For over a month now, the Gen Z have led protests in different parts of the country, particularly in major towns. While this has seen action taken by the head of state, such as the recent cabinet dissolving, it has also seen millions worth of property destroyed and lives lost. The second in command fears that this situation could worsen if the Gen Z insist on demonstrating.
Please, we have heard you. Mumeongea vizuri. Mumesikika. Yale yote mnataka imeeleweka. And you have made your point. You don't need to rub it in.
Gachagua has emphasized the need for optimism despite current difficulties.
Kama taifa la Jamhuri ya Kenya, sitaki tukufe roho. Tuko na matatizo hapa na pale ya kiuchumi, ya siasa yetu, ya vile tunaendesha mambo, lakini tuko na matumaini.
Looking ahead to the 2027 general election, Gachagua encouraged Kenyans to choose a leader who can effectively address the country's needs.
Sisi mumeambia tuangalie mawe, tuchonge kwanza kwa Kware, tujenge naye. Hata nyinyi kifika uchaguzi, mchonge mawe kwanza.
Elsewhere, while taking note of significant progress in reducing alcohol abuse among young men, Gachagua has also highlighted government's efforts in further combating illicit alcohol.
We have made good stride, and we have seen the positive outcome tukipigana na hii pombe. Vijana wameanza kurudi kufanya kazi, wamerudi kuchunga familia. They have become responsible. They are taking care of their wives and children.
His plea to the Gen Z comes days before planned demonstrations set for Tuesday. Ben Kirira, K24, Nairobi.
On to other news, Azimio principal Raila Odinga has denied allegations of being bribed to form a government of national unity with President William Ruto. In a statement, the former Prime Minister has come out to issue fresh demands before talks of any kind are done. Among the demands include compensation of relatives of those killed by the police during protests.
No dialogue.
In a statement, Raila Odinga has dismissed claims that he is looking forward to forming a government of national unity with President William Ruto. Odinga dismissed these claims as baseless propaganda, reaffirming his solidarity for the ongoing Gen Z protests, stating that he will continue to stand in solidarity with the movement because they are raising genuine issues that Azimio raised last year. Odinga said for the talks to happen, several issues need to be addressed, including compensation to the relatives of those who were killed by the police and gun violence during the protests, including the one for last year. The unconditional release of all arrested political protesters, dropping all pending charges against the protesters, halting abductions and extrajudicial killings of protesters, arresting and prosecuting police officers involved in the abductions and killings of the protesters, and stopping any reappointments of the dismissed cabinet secretaries. The former Prime Minister said these conditions will demonstrate to Kenyans that the government has goodwill to create a conducive environment for a national broad-based people's convention to address the nation's critical issues. At the same time, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka maintained that talks will not happen until justice for killed Kenyans is sought. The Wiper leader, speaking while attending a church service in Nairobi, maintained that the stand of the coalition is with the Gen Z.
In my view, terrible on our part if we are just to assume that we never lost anybody, we go and shake hands with the government and do whatever. We will be sacrificing our youth. This has been our position. And we have made it also very clear, even recently, as Azimio la Umoja, when we addressed the media at the SKM Command Center, that we are standing with the Gen Z and with the people of Kenya, the majority of whom recognize the tremendous dawn brought about by our young people.
Kalonzo refuted claims of cracks within the opposition, saying they are intact and that the government has failed in its mandate, insisting the coalition is not interested in forming a government of national unity.
The communication that I was issuing on behalf of all of us, including my brother Raila Odinga, was that we are not boarding. That was our thing. That Azimio's position is we are not joining what they are calling government of national unity. We could consider something like transitional government of national unity, where everybody comes down. They resign their positions and then we can then talk of transition. All right? We can talk of transition. That's what we are saying. And we made it clear, if anybody was tempted to join Ruto's government, they were doing it as themselves, individuals, but not on behalf of, Azimio la Umoja, or supported in that effort by Azimio la Umoja. Okay? So, we are solid as Azimio.
This statement comes amidst political tension and speculation about potential shifts in Kenya's political landscape. Recently, President William Ruto, when naming half of his cabinet, suggested that the future government would reflect the aspirations of all Kenyans, ensuring representation from every part of the country. There is also speculation that the remaining 10 positions yet to be filled have been reserved for the opposition, who appear to be divided.
If we can have some peace outside.
However, the opposition maintains they are united. Brian Amwai, K24.
A coalition of civil society organizations in Kenya have issued a series of demands to the government, insisting on the conditions before entering into any dialogue. The first demand is for the government to publicly acknowledge and apologize to all victims of police brutality by name. They have also called for recognition and compensation for media houses targeted during recent events.
Civil society groups are now defending the Gen Z movement, describing it as constitutionally protected right to associate and protest. They note that any dialogue will only proceed once the president implements the requested changes, not as he instructs.
Mwamko mpya wa masuala ya uongozi wa hii nchi, wa kuangalia rasilimali za hii nchi, wa uwajibikaji kwa hii nchi. Ndio maana wanatofautiana sana wakiangalia zile mambo William Samoei Ruto na Kenya Kwanza government ilisema wakati wa campaign. Wakiangalia manifesto yao, wakiangalia ile mambo wanafanya, wakiangalia na katiba, wanashangaa kwani hao watu walisema nini na wanafanya nini.
The organizations have condemned the government for focusing on its own losses rather than the lives lost during the demonstrations. They are now demanding their unconditional release of those arrested during the protest and end to police brutality.
It is very unfortunate that we have not seen this in him. Our very children, that he was to safeguard their welfare in general. Today, as the mothers of this nation, we have buried so many of them. Within a span of 1 month, we have buried over 50 children. And that breaks our hearts, Mr. President.
Another key issue raised was the president's reappointment of 6 cabinet secretaries, which has drawn criticism across the country.
They say that you are bringing back Mr. Kithure Kindiki, whom you praise for having done a good job, but young people are saying that, are you bringing him to kill more people? Maybe to reach the number that he was supposed to reach. They are saying that if you are bringing the same people that you fired, then the bloods of the young people have been spilled on the streets in vain. Nobody is opposed to a national dialogue, to a national conversation, but let justice prevail.
The president has also been urged to address Kenya's significant public debt, both internal and external, to create conducive environment for dialogue. The civil societies further demand an end to profiling of protesters, abductions, and attacks on the media.
We have seen an intensified profiling, trailing, and abduction of young people who are perceived to have been at the forefront of the protest, the nationwide protests. We have seen an attempt to victimize civil society organizations, including international NGOs that have worked with this in this country, supported development projects, including the recently held climate conference that was held in Nairobi.
Among the key issues discussed, the fate of higher education funding remains a critical concern. The civil societies insist that addressing these fundamental problems is essential for any meaningful dialogue with the government.
It's a barrier in the sense that it has skyrocketed the cost of university education, and we are going to see, and you're already seeing, a very unprecedented number of people, intentionally choosing not to apply for universities because of the cost practicality.
Mercy Avoga, K24.
Outspoken Nakuru Catholic Diocese Bishop Cleophas Osese has termed the newly appointed cabinet changes by President William Ruto as cosmetic. The outspoken cleric accused the president of recycling people who had been rejected by the public, warning that this could spark a fresh wave of demonstrations. This even as Siaya Governor James Orengo maintains that the country needs to prioritize justice to the victims of police brutality over the formation of a broad-based government. This comes even as ODM Chairman John Mbadi maintains that it's time for a national dialogue and Azimio cannot follow Kalonzo any longer.
The newly appointed cabinet continued to attract mixed reactions. Outspoken Nakuru Catholic Diocese Bishop Cleophas Osese now says that the appointment fell short of the country's expectations.
Watu wanatarajia kuona sura mpya na wanatarajia Kenya mpya na mambo yafanyike kwa upya. Kwa hivyo mimi ningesema kwamba jambo hilo limefanywa kwa njia ambayo labda sio nzuri ama yako chini ya matarajio ambayo watu walikuwa nayo. Kwa hivyo mimi ningependa basi hata jambo hilo likienda mbele, wale ambao wanahusika kukagua wale ambao wamechaguliwa, pia kama tunaona hawastahili tuseme kwamba pia hawastahili.
The bishop at the same time took issue with the proposal to form a government of national unity with the opposition, noting that this would water down the spirit of democracy. He said that the move by the president was meant to weaken the opposition, adding that it should be ignored as this was against the spirit of the constitution.
Wale tunaona ni kama yanapuuzwa zaidi na viongozi hawazingatii yale ambao wananchi wanawaambia, na haya tumeona madhara yake. Ikiwa hatutasikiza watu, basi kutatokea mambo ambayo hayatakuwa mazuri kwa taifa letu hili.
This comes at a time Raila Odinga's top lieutenant James Orengo has maintained that the country needs to prioritize justice to the victims of police brutality over the formation of a broad-based government. According to Orengo, it is not in order for politicians to be enthusiastic about getting into political offices at the expense of building democratic institutions that will ensure Kenyans enjoy their basic rights.
Have the reason changed why we want Raila Amolo Odinga to be president as opposed to Ruto? Are we saying that now we're prepared for Ruto to rule us until 2032? Those are issues we must put on the table. I may believe that Raila Amolo Odinga is still the person who can change and reform this country. But by acceding to Ruto without...
I am in total disagreement with James Agriole. He's my senior, he's my friend, but where he is wrong, I will tell him you are wrong. You cannot tell us that we cannot dialogue, that we cannot talk with Ruto, we cannot talk as Kenyans. What is the alternative? We cannot play politics of populism. We cannot play politics of theory. We have been playing politics of theory since independence. That is why we have got these things wrong.
At the same time, Machakos Governor Wavinya Ndeti has advised President William Ruto to take his time while picking individuals for his cabinet. The governor observed that although public servants cannot be without fault, the president has the opportunity to identify and pick individuals who are able to work for Kenyans.
Na kweli alianza kuwasikiza, amemake zile changes, amemake. Kila ningemwomba, take time. Asikimbilie, take time. Asikize wananchi na achague wale watu wananchi wanataka. Wale watu wanaweza kufanyia wananchi kazi. Although human beings are not 100%, sindio? We are all not 100%, lakini kuna wale wako afadhali, sindio?
Ruto on Friday named 11 cabinet secretaries, majority drawn from the cabinet he had previously sacked, to a new government meant to respond to the grievances of young protesters. Gladys Midecha, K24 TV, Nairobi.
Away from that, police in Mwatate, Taita Taveta County have intercepted a truck carrying hundreds of ethanol cylinders worth millions of shillings. The police are also looking for the driver of the trailer, who is said to have escaped after he was stopped by the police officers on Mwatate Road towards Taita Taveta.
This is the trailer that was nabbed by the police at Mwatate Road en route to Taveta. According to the police, this truck was seized after the driver refused to stop when he was stopped by law enforcers.
Driver ya hiyo lori akavanish, akapotea kwa sababu ilikuwa usiku. Baadaye gari ikaletwa mpaka kwa police station. Wakati inaangaliwa, ikafunguliwa hiyo container, ikapatikana imebeba ethanol.
The police claimed that investigation showed that the truck had 130 cylinders of ethanol and each cylinder was carrying 250 liters.
Ikafunguliwa hiyo container, ikapatikana imebeba ethanol 130 of 250 liters each. So officers wa DCI wanaendelea na uchunguzi wao na kutafuta driver na mwenye gari.
Mwatate Police Commander says that a detailed investigation is being conducted to determine where the driver of this truck disappeared to, as well as looking for the owner of the load.
Investigation team from DCI are investigating and trying to trace the driver and the owner so that they can be arraigned before court.
The police also say that the truck had a fake registration number that differed from its insurance registration.
Insurance inaonyesha kwamba hii nambari inatakikana ikuwe KBF, sio KBE. KBF 947U, sio 966Y. Ukichambua pia unapata iko na nati moja tu ya kubadilisha. Kutoa ni rahisi. Kutoa ni rahisi.
DCI officials have vowed to investigate the matter while asking the public to provide any information to the police to fasten the investigations. Sheila Tembur, K24 TV.
Well, we are due for a short commercial break, and we come back, we'll be reviewing what's on our dailies with my key guest in studio. That is the Honorable Esther Passaris, Nairobi Woman Representative, Wanjiru Gikonyo, advocate for good governance and accountability, and as well Kasmuel Makuri, revolutionary artist. And later on in the program, we'll be joined by Kirito Shege, who is a Gen Z activist virtually. But keep the conversation going via social media platforms at K24 TV, at Joel Chacha, as well on SMS and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. Of course, I'll be sampling them before wrapping up this program this morning. We take a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.